3 months before my sister's wedding, I stood in my parents' marble foyer, my arms laden with imported peonies, the lush, rounded flowers everyone loves in bridal bouquets, and ivory silk ribbons, when I heard something that stopped my heart cold. I'd driven 2 hours through traffic to deliver flowers I'd hand-selected from the city's most exclusive florist, arrangements they'd never acknowledge, but I'd come to expect. That's when I heard my sister Emily's voice slicing through the hallway like breaking glass. "Mom, I'm not discussing this anymore. She cannot be at my wedding. Gabriel will be there, and I need him to see me as the beautiful one. Have you seen the dress she picked out? She'll steal every bit of attention. I won't allow it." The words hit like physical blows, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen behind the archway, barely breathing. My mother's voice came quieter, hesitant. "Emily, that's your sister. We can't simply—" "Yes, we can." Emily cut her off. "Tell her we're keeping the guest list intimate. Tell her whatever you need to. Just make sure she's not there." I heard my father exhale, that particular sound he makes when he's about to side with something he knows is cruel. Genevieve does have a way of commanding a room. Perhaps Emily has a point. This is her day, after all. I stepped back carefully, the silk ribbons trembling in my grip. The afternoon sunlight streaming through their leaded glass windows suddenly felt harsh and exposing as I made my way to my car, hands shaking as I set the flowers gently in the passenger seat. I couldn't believe my family was planning to exclude me from my own sister's wedding because Emily was jealous of how I looked. For a long moment, I just sat there in their circular driveway, staring at the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to walk back inside and force them to say it to my face. But another part, the part that had spent years making myself smaller, quieter, less threatening to Emily's fragile ego, understood it would change nothing. They'd already made their choice. The sister, who was too much, too successful, too threatening. I'd been dimming my own light for years trying to make Emily feel brighter, and it still wasn't enough. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just drove the 2 hours back to my downtown Atlanta office, the city's skyline blurring slightly across Peachtree Street as the evening sun reflected off glass towers. At the time, I didn't know that the very man my sister was desperate to impress would one day walk through my office doors and see me more clearly than my own family had ever tried to. My name is Genevieve, and I orchestrate dreams for a living. Not the vague, wishful kind. The tangible ones. The kind where a bride walks down an aisle lined with 10,000 white roses, where champagne fountains cascade under crystal chandeliers, where every detail is so flawlessly executed that guests forget to breathe. I plan weddings for tech executives, entertainment industry royalty, families whose last names you'd recognize from buildings downtown. I've turned ballrooms into enchanted forests and beachfronts into something out of fairy tales. My family calls it party planning. At holiday dinners, when someone asks what I do, my mother waves her hand dismissively and says I arrange flowers and pick out napkins. Emily usually adds something about how exhausting it must be to deal with bridezillas all day. They've never asked to see my portfolio. Never attended a single event I've created. Not one. But here's what they don't mention at their country club brunches when they talk about Emily's upcoming wedding. I paid for it. $5,000 for the venue, a historic estate with rose gardens, and a reception hall that books out 2 years in advance. I transferred the money 6 weeks ago without hesitation, the same way I've always stepped in when they needed something. The imported peonies I brought today? Mine. The custom letterpress invitations with Emily's monogram? I designed them. The champagne tower rentals, the silk table runners, the vintage china service for 200 guests? All quietly arranged, all quietly paid for. Emily gets to be the radiant bride. I get the invoices. And now, apparently, I don't even get an invitation to watch her walk down the aisle I'm funding. Just 3 days' notice that I'm too much of a threat to her perfect day to be allowed through the door. The text came through while I was reviewing fabric samples for a client's ceremony draping. My mother's message was brief, almost cheerful. "Hi, sweetheart. Just confirming, can you transfer the venue deposit this week? The estate needs it by Friday. Emily is so grateful for your support." I stared at the screen, a swatch of champagne silk still pinched between my fingers. They were going to take my money and still cut me out. The audacity was almost impressive. I opened my banking app and transferred $5,000. No message. No conditions. Just sent it. I wanted to see if they'd actually go through with it. Wednesday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth. I was updating a seating chart when my phone lit up with my mother's name. I let it ring twice before answering. Genevieve, darling. Her voice had that practiced sweetness she uses when delivering news she knows will sting. I wanted to call before the weekend. We've made a difficult decision about the wedding. We're keeping it very intimate, just close family and Gabriel's relatives. You understand, don't you? I set down my pen slowly. You're uninviting me. Please don't phrase it that way. It's just, Emily really needs to feel confident and happy on her special day. She's been so stressed, and we think it's best if I'm not there to make her feel insecure. I finished quietly. The pause stretched between us, filled only by the hum of traffic outside my office window. Also, my mother continued, her voice tightening, Emily has decided to work with another planner. Someone she's more comfortable with. I hope you'll understand that too. I understood perfectly. I was useful for writing checks, but not valuable enough to witness the event they bought with my money. I have to go, I said softly, and ended the call. Something inside me didn't break. It crystallized. The wedding happened on a Saturday in late spring. I know because I spent that afternoon finalizing centerpiece arrangements for a tech mogul's daughter, 500 white orchids that needed to be perfect. I didn't check social media. Didn't torture myself with photos of the venue I'd paid for, the guests filling seats that should have included mine. I thought avoiding it would be enough. Then Janet called 4 days later. I need to tell you what happened, my cousin said, her voice tight with anger. I'm so sorry, Genevieve. I should have said something at the wedding, but I was in shock. I set down the invitation, mock-up I'd been reviewing. Go ahead. Your mother told everyone you were very sick, that you'd been struggling with some kind of illness for months and were too embarrassed to attend because you didn't want people to see you that way. Emily actually cried during her toast, talking about how heartbroken she was that her fragile sister couldn't be there to celebrate with her. The words landed like ice water. They said I was sick? My voice came out strangely flat. Worse. They made it sound like you were secluded, struggling, like you'd pushed everyone away because you couldn't handle being around people anymore. Gabriel, Emily's husband, he looked so concerned. Half the guests were asking me if you were okay, if there was anything they could do. I stood up from my desk, phone pressed to my ear, staring out at the city's skyline without really seeing it. They didn't just exclude me. They rewrote the entire story to make themselves look compassionate and me look broken. They took my absence, the one they demanded, and turned it into my shame, my weakness, my failure. Genevieve, are you still there? I'm here, I said quietly. After we hung up, I stood in that same spot for a long time, watching the sun sink behind glass towers. Something inside me didn't bend anymore. It snapped clean. I'd spent years trying to earn their approval, to be small enough, quiet enough, unthreatening enough for Emily's ego. I was done. I turned back to my desk and opened my laptop. If they were going to lie about my life, I'd build one so undeniable they'd choke on their own fiction. 1 year after Emily's wedding, I was reviewing contracts for a San Francisco tech wedding when an email arrived that made me read the sender line 3 times to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. The subject line was simple: Wedding Planning Inquiry, Prince Henri of Monaco. My hands went still on the keyboard. The email was from the royal household's chief of staff, inquiring about my availability for the prince's upcoming nuptials. They'd seen my work featured in Vogue weddings. They wanted someone who understood both elegance and discretion. They wanted me. 2 weeks later, I stood in Monaco with the Mediterranean stretching endlessly blue beyond palace walls. The chief planner, Vivian, a French woman whose portfolio included fashion weeks and state dinners, greeted me like a colleague, not a subordinate. Your florals for the Silicon Valley ceremony last month, she said, kissing both my cheeks. Exquisite. His Highness will be pleased. For 3 months, I lived between two worlds. My office in the city and Monaco's palace gardens where we orchestrated something extraordinary. 10,000 roses in shades of blush and ivory. A ceremony on the palace terrace at sunset. Reception tables that looked like they were floating on clouds of white hydrangeas. When the wedding happened, the world watched. Vogue ran a 12-page spread. The New York Times style section featured my work. Instagram exploded with images of centerpieces I'd designed, the ceremony arch I'd envisioned. My inbox flooded with inquiries, celebrities, executives, families whose wealth was measured in generations. But it was the BBC interview that changed everything. The reporter asked how I'd achieved such success so young. I smiled into the camera and said simply, I stopped trying to make myself smaller for people who needed me to stay small. The clip went viral. Within a week, I had offers from clients in London, Dubai, Los Angeles. My rates tripled. Publications that had never returned my calls were requesting interviews. I'd built exactly what I'd promised myself that day in my office, a life so undeniable that their fiction couldn't touch it. And I knew my family was watching. My mother called 3 days after the BBC interview aired. I was in my office reviewing proposals when her name lit up my screen. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or maybe some old, stubborn hope, made me pick up. Genevieve. We saw the news about Monaco. How wonderful for you, sweetheart. Her voice was warm, proud even. Your father and I always knew you had something special. I said nothing, waiting. Actually, I'm calling because Emily's 1-year anniversary is coming up, and we thought it would be lovely if you could plan a small celebration. Nothing too elaborate, maybe 50 guests. And since you're family, we assumed you'd want to do this as a gift. The audacity stole my breath. Also, she continued, as if discussing weekend plans, we're a bit tight this month. Could you send 5,000? Just to help with some bills. You know how it is. For a moment, I was that girl again, standing in their foyer with flowers in my arms, making myself smaller, quieter, less. Then I wasn't. No, I said clearly. I'm sorry. I said no. I won't be planning Emily's anniversary. I won't be sending money. And, Mother, I kept my voice steady, professional, final. Never call me with demands like this again. I ended the call before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something that felt startlingly like freedom. I'd spent years funding their comfort while they erased my existence. I'd bent myself into shapes that hurt, believing it would earn me a place at their table. I was done bending. 2 months after I hung up on my mother, a man walked into my office on a Saturday afternoon when I wasn't expecting clients. He was tall, well-dressed in a way that suggested quiet wealth rather than flash. Charcoal wool coat, leather gloves he removed carefully at the door. Dark hair, kind eyes, and a presence that filled the room without demanding it. I'm sorry to drop in unannounced, he said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't quite place. Are you Genevieve? I am. I set down the fabric samples I'd been reviewing. Can I help you? I hope so. My name is Gabriel. He extended his hand, and I shook it, noting the wedding band on his left hand. I've been following your work. The Monaco wedding was extraordinary. I'm curious, how did you get started in this field? Did you have family support? The question landed strangely, too specific, but I'd learned to read people in this business. He wasn't here to book a wedding. He was here for something else. Still, I answered honestly. I built this from the ground up. It wasn't easy, but I love what I do. Would you mind showing me around? I'd love to understand your process. I gave him the tour I'd given to countless clients, the showroom where sample gowns hung like captured clouds, each one a story of lace and silk and someone's vision of perfection. The display cases holding vintage diamond brooches, Art Deco rings, delicate tiaras that caught the afternoon light. I explained my design philosophy, how I worked with florists and venues, the psychology of creating moments that feel both magical and authentic. He listened with an intensity that felt almost uncomfortable, asking thoughtful questions, studying everything like he was searching for something specific. I didn't disparage my family. Didn't mention the exclusion or the lies. Whatever he was looking for, I wouldn't give him ammunition against them. Even now. After 20 minutes of walking through my work, my life, the business I'd built with my own hands, he paused near a collection of wedding portraits, happy couples whose days I'd orchestrated. Your sister, he said carefully. Emily. She's married now, isn't she? My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. Yes. Just over a year ago. To an amazing man, from what I understand. I'm sure they're very happy. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm sure, he said quietly. Gabriel's expression shifted, something between sadness and bitter irony crossing his features. I am that man, he said quietly. I'm Emily's husband. The words hung in the air between us. I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't move, didn't react beyond a slight tightening in my chest. Your cousin Janet, he continued, his voice steady but strained. She told me everything. After the wedding, I started noticing behaviors. Emily's jealousy wasn't just about other women. It was about anyone I spent time with. Friends I'd had for 20 years suddenly weren't welcome in our home. Business partners she deemed too friendly. My own siblings. He walked to the window, looking out at the city rather than at me. She needs to be the center of everything. Always. If I have lunch with my brother, there's a fight. If I attend a colleague's birthday party without her, I'm abandoning her. I've lost contracts because she's made scenes at networking events. My parents barely speak to me anymore because she convinced me they were undermining our marriage. I stayed quiet, letting him speak. Janet pulled me aside at a family dinner last month. She asked if I knew what really happened with you, why you weren't at our wedding. I said you'd been sick, that you were struggling, secluded. He turned back to face me, his eyes holding something raw. That's what they told me. That you were fragile, that you pushed everyone away, that you couldn't handle being around people. A sound that might have been a laugh escaped my throat. And you believed them? I had no reason not to, until Janet told me the truth. About the exclusion, about the $5,000, about the lies they told at the wedding. His voice dropped. I needed to see for myself, to know if everything else they'd told me was a lie too. He gestured around my office, the evidence of success surrounding us, the international press clippings framed on the wall, the designer showroom that spoke of anything but someone sickly and secluded. You planned a royal wedding, he said, something like wonder and devastation in his voice. You're not struggling. You're not fragile. The person I met today doesn't exist anywhere in their stories. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant even. But looking at this man, this stranger who'd walked into my office carrying the weight of my sister's toxicity, I felt only pity. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I'm sorry she's done this to you. I came to apologize to you, Gabriel said, for being part of it, for believing their version without question. He moved toward the door, then paused. She turned you into a ghost story to justify cutting you out. I wonder what story she's been telling about me. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving only the faint scent of winter air and the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. I didn't hear from Gabriel again that day. But I knew, the way you know when a storm is about to break, that something had shifted irreversibly. The call came that night. Not from Gabriel. From Emily. Her voice was frantic, unrecognizable. Genevieve, please. You have to help me. Gabriel left. He's ending our marriage and it's... A sob cut through the line. It's all because of you. I set down my wine glass carefully, my entire body going still. He said he can't be with someone who's jealous and manipulative. That the way I treated you shows who I really am. But he doesn't understand. I was protecting myself. You've always been the beautiful one, the successful one. I just wanted one day that was mine. The words should have hurt. Maybe a year ago, they would have. Now they just sounded hollow. Emily. You have to talk to him, she interrupted, desperation sharpening her voice. You're a wedding planner. You're good with people. You know how to make things sound right. Just tell him I've changed. Use that professional charm you have. Please. The irony was almost breathtaking. She wanted me to save the marriage she'd tried to keep me from witnessing. I can't do that, Emily. You won't, you mean? Her voice turned venomous. This is what you wanted, isn't it? To ruin my life the way you think I ruined yours. This has nothing to do with me, I said quietly. This is between you and Gabriel. What you did to me was just the proof he needed of something he was already living with. I hate you, she hissed. I've always hated you. I know, I said softly. And I hung up. Over the next 48 hours, the calls multiplied. Emily contacted everyone, mutual friends, distant relatives, even family friends from years ago, begging them to intervene. Janet texted me updates. Gabriel had moved out. Emily was unraveling. Our parents were devastated. Then my mother called, her voice raw in a way I'd never heard. Emily says this is our fault. That we enabled her, made her think it was acceptable to treat you the way she did. She's saying terrible things, Genevieve. Terrible things about all of us. I listened to her cry. This woman who'd taken my money and erased my presence, who'd chosen Emily's insecurity over my dignity again and again. She's not wrong, I said finally. You did enable her. We were trying to protect her. She's always been sensitive, fragile. She's not fragile. She's cruel. And you taught her that cruelty was acceptable as long as it was wrapped in insecurity. My mother's breath caught. What do we do? That's not my problem to solve anymore, I said. I hope you figured out. This time when I ended the call, I felt no guilt. No obligation. No lingering hope that this would be the moment they finally saw me clearly. I'd stopped waiting for that moment. I'd built my own instead. 6 months later, I stood in my newly expanded office space overlooking the harbor, watching sailboats cut white lines across blue water. The walls held framed covers from Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Town and Country. Publications that once felt impossible now documented my work in gilt frames. But the most significant change wasn't visible in awards or press coverage. His name was Marcus, an architect I'd met at a gallery opening, who'd spent 20 minutes discussing the structural beauty of historic venues before he ever asked me to dinner. When I told him about Monaco, his eyes lit up with genuine excitement. When clients praised my work in his presence, he squeezed my hand under the table, proud rather than threatened. You're extraordinary, he'd said one evening, watching me sketch floral arrangements for a vineyard ceremony. Not as a complaint, as a celebration. We were planning our own wedding now, something small, intimate, honest. No performance. No pretense. Just two people who'd found each other and decided to build something real. I'd also started mentoring 3 young planners who reminded me of myself at 25, hungry and talented, and unsure if there was room for them in this industry. I taught them about contracts and boundaries, about knowing their worth and never apologizing for expertise. My family had gone quiet after Emily's divorce. Occasional texts from my mother that I read but rarely answered. Emily herself had moved across the country, a fresh start, Janet reported, though the bitterness apparently remained. I'd established permanent boundaries. No money, no last-minute demands, no shrinking myself to accommodate anyone's insecurity. They could be part of my life if they chose to see me clearly. Otherwise, I had built something better. Standing there in my office, surrounded by evidence of dreams I'd made real for strangers and now for myself, I finally understood something I'd been too afraid to believe before. Some people will always see your light as a threat to their darkness. But dimming yourself doesn't make them brighter. It just makes you invisible. I'd spent years apologizing for being successful, for being capable, for being enough. Bending myself smaller, quieter, less threatening to egos that couldn't handle my existence. I was done apologizing. The life I'd built wasn't revenge. It was liberation. And it was entirely, undeniably mine. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. If any part of it felt familiar, you're not alone. If you'd like to hear more real family stories like this one, you can subscribe to the channel. And if this story brought up something personal for you, feel free to share it in the comments. I do read them. Thanks for listening.